Hi guys, welcome to another class of American-European relations. Today we're going to be talking about economy. We're going to be talking about transatlantic economic relations. And this class is particularly important because on Friday, 2 days from now, you will have a pop quiz available on Blackboard that you have to log in at any time during the day and you can take the test. It's only 5 minutes, so once you start the test, you cannot get out of it. If you get out, that's your score. You cannot come back to it. So make sure you follow the instructions and you do well. If you have any problem, just let me know. I'll try to find any solution. But please make sure that you log into Blackboard on Friday because that's when the test is going to be available. It will show up there only during Friday. So once that's been said, let's go into today's class. We're going to be talking about 3 different aspects of the economy. First, the common economic history, where all that starts, and actually even starts earlier, but obviously events that took place after World War II are definitely important. We've already mentioned them in class. We are also going to talk about the European-American economic ties, how much connected our economies are, and we'll see that these two are the 2 largest economies, but also they are the 2 economies that are closer together to each other. And last but not least, we're going to talk about a few issues that are going on at the moment. We're going to talk about the current administration. We're going to be talking about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. That was a project that was launched around 2013 that now seems to be, well, de-escalating, so to say. And last, we're going to talk about the European vision on all this. So let's get started. And if we talk about post-World War II and how can we justify, we talk about common economic history after World War II, you should already know the answer to this question. And the answer to this question, well, you can find 2 of them, but clearly are, on the one hand, Bretton Woods system, and on the other hand, the Marshall Plan. Bretton Woods system, we know about it. We know about IMF and we know about the World Bank. Particularly important for American European interests nowadays is the IMF, even more than the World Bank, because by the end of the day, as we mentioned in class, the World Bank is an investment bank for developing countries. And well, the European Union and America and the US obviously do not fall under this category. And more importantly, but by the end of the day, we share a position there. We share economic connection, economic ties, and these were created after World War II. And on the other hand, we have Marshall Plan. And Marshall Plan, we've discussed it in depth in class. And actually, it's quite interesting. Now with COVID-19, European countries are including into the narrative an European Marshall Plan to come out of this crisis. Actually, yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen, in an interview, she mentioned this concept and she thought that this will be necessary to reactivate European economy. And later, when we talk about the economic crisis of 2006, 2008, you will see that this is completely different. And actually, that's an interesting aspect of the current crisis, which, interesting aspect, of course. It's by the end of the day, in terms of research, the crisis is absolutely terrible in terms of how it's going to damage the economy. But the outcome is going to be interesting where it comes from. So, to common economic history, we can also talk about 2008 financial crisis. The origin, we all know about this, Lehman Brothers falling, and this obviously having an impact on the American financial system, because also the subprime crisis, all these mortgages that were given to people with no assets that they could not pay back, and that made the whole system collapse. And this extended quite rapidly to the European Union. Why? Because both economies are connected and rely on each other to work properly. So it made it to the European Union. However, how it impacted both sides of the Atlantic is different. Well, the US in 2008 lost 2.6 of the GDP. Europe, the European Union, was losing 4.1. A year later, the United States was recovering from that already, while the European Union economy was still shrinking. So actually, the depth of the crisis on this side of the Atlantic was much bigger. I don't know what memories you have of this time. This is actually already 12 years ago, so you were quite young at that time. But in a sense, we already came out, it seemed like, but we were still feeling the aftershocks here in Europe. Well, in America, this is kind of business that is already gone and it seems far past. And why did the US perform better than the European Union? Actually, because of on the one hand, the stimulus program. The United States put more money into bailouts, actually over $775 billion, while the European Union as itself. I mean, we're not talking about national governments here that they did their own bailouts. Only 200 billion. So that's quite different, and that's the banking sector bailout. Was 700 billion in the US and 100 billion in the European Union. What was also different, the interest rate. This is quite interesting. You need to understand the European Union. We've already studied the institutions of the European Union. There was one that we did not mention because it does not affect every single European Union member state, but only those who have the euro as their currency. And this is the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is the European Federal Reserve, so to say, is the one that determines what the interest rate is going to be. And the Federal Reserve very quickly into the crisis dropped interest rate at which banks could borrow money up down to 0.25% 2010, but already in 2008 was 2%. Well, in Europe took much longer, and you might wonder why it took much longer in Europe. But this is one of the keys to understand why it took longer to Europe to get out of the crisis. It had to do with actually having 28 different economies, well, in this case only Eurozone countries, but by now they were 28 different countries with 28 different national interests, not properly coordinating on a solution for the crisis. When we talked about solidarity nowadays, actually this time was quite controversial because while German economy was still growing, Southern European economies were already struggling, and it was not on German interest to drop the interest rate because actually that could affect consumption in Germany. So as Germany is so influential to the European Central Bank and to the European Union itself, it took much longer to take the monetary solutions, so to say, to reactivate Southern economies, and that's why the crisis was felt even more in Southern Europe than, well, obviously than Central Europe and than in the US. But by the end of the day, what I want to tell you with this is that actually whatever happens nowadays in economy, something happens in the US is going to affect Europe and the other way around. By the end of the day, both economies are quite connected and they have a common fate in a sense. Okay, now we're going to have a brief break, then we're going to talk about the economic ties and we'll continue with the class. See you in a minute.